get started, let's look at the book of prayer. Father, I thank you for this day you've given. I thank you, Lord, for the opportunity we have to take a look, Lord, at the book of Acts today. I pray you'd help us to glean something from it. Help us to understand something from your word today. I pray you be with us and bless in all this stuff. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I want to begin reading actually in verse 1. I'm going to read down through about verse 15. Men, brethren, and fathers, hear ye my defense, which I make now unto you. When they heard that he spake in Hebrew tongue to them, they kept the more silent, and he said, I am verily a man which am a Jew, born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, yet brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous toward God, as ye are this day. And I persecuted this way unto death, binding and delivering into prisons both men and women. As also the high priest doth bear me witness, and all the estate of the elders, from whom also I received letters unto the brethren, and went to Damascus to bring them which were there bound unto Jerusalem for to judge. It came to pass that as I made my journey and was come nigh to Damascus about noon, suddenly there shone from heaven a great light round about me, and I fell unto the ground. And I heard a voice saying unto me, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And I answered and said, Who art thou, Lord? And he said, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom thou persecuted. And they that were with me saw indeed the light, and were afraid, but they heard not the voice of him that spake to me. And I said, What shall I do, Lord? And the Lord said unto me, Arise and go to Damascus, and there shall be told thee of all things that are appointed for thee to do. And when I could not see for the glory of the light, being led by the hand of them that were with me, I came to Damascus. And one Ananias, a devout man, according to the law, having a good report of all the Jews that dwelt there, came unto me and stood and said unto me, Brother Saul, receive thy sight. The same hour I looked up upon him. And he said, The God of our fathers hath chosen thee, that thou shouldest know his will, and see the just one, and see that just one, and shouldest hear the voice of his mouth. For thou shalt be witness unto all men of what thou hast seen and heard. Listen, Father, thank you for this day you've given, and thank you, Lord, for the way you work in our lives. Help us to understand your word. Pray you bless in Jesus' name. Amen. You know, we never know when we have to speak up for the Lord. You really don't. Paul was worshiping at the temple. He went there. Now, he was told when he went to Jerusalem there was going to be problems. He was warned. Don't go, but he believed it was God's will to go, and so he did that. He went to Jerusalem to, in fact, present the Word of God and to have an opportunity to talk to some fellow Jews. He had said, even back in the book of Romans, that it was his heart's desire and prayer for Israel that they might be saved. Well, as Paul was there worshiping in the temple, he's falsely accused of something he did not do. He was accused of bringing a Gentile into the temple compound. That was something you did not do. There were signs around the outside area of the temple was the court of the Gentiles. That was supposed to be a place of prayer for Gentiles of all nations who were looking, seeking, hoping to find the truth. But there supposedly was a sign as you would enter the temple compound that any Gentile that went past that place would be put to death. Paul was accused of bringing someone through there. He did not do that. But as a result of that, a riot follows. And as a result of that, I'm kind of summarizing the end of chapter 21 for you and getting us where we are in 22. The riot follows, and the Roman captain of the guard, there was a Roman guard house basically right on the edge of the temple compound. There was a good reason for that. Because it seemed to be the place where if something was going to happen, it was going to happen. It was going to start there. So the Romans had, in fact, a area right near there where there were guards, and the Roman captain of the guard sees the riot that ensues and rushes down, and they grab the Apostle Paul. Paul then asks for an opportunity to speak to people. And Paul gives his testimony. You know, the story of Paul's conversion is seen at least 3 times in the book of Acts. It's seen in Acts chapter 9, when it actually historically was supposed to be. It was seen in Acts 22, which is right here. And it's seen in Acts 26, when he makes his defense before, I think it's Felix. It's either Felix or Festus. I always get those 2 guys mixed up. It's one of them. It was either Felix or Festus. He then talks of his conversion one more time in Philippians 3 and in 1 Timothy 1. But as we look at this presentation of his testimony, I think we can get 5 guidelines for when we give our testimony to those who are unsaved. So I want to look at those today. 5 guidelines for present, because in all reality, one of the best things we have in dealing with unsaved folks, presenting the gospel, is our own testimony of what the Lord has done in our lives. And I want to look at some things from the Apostle Paul's presentation, from what he says, that I think can help us in our own testimonies. First thing I want us to notice is, first of all, he establishes common ground with his listeners. Look at verses 1 through 4. Men, brethren, and fathers, hear ye my defense, which I make now unto you. And when they heard that he spake in the Hebrew tongue to them, they kept them more silent. And he saith, I am verily a man, which am a Jew, born in Tarshish, a city in Cilicia, brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous toward God, as ye are this day. And I persecuted this way unto death, binding and delivering into prison both men and women. Paul begins by finding common ground with those to whom he wants to share his testimony. He says, hey, I'm a Jew just like you. He's speaking in Hebrew, number 1. He begins by telling them, I'm just like you. He addresses them as brothers. He speaks to them in their native language. And notice that he even says, I hated those of the way too. You know, the way, when it talks about in verse 4, I persecuted this way unto death. This way was referring to those who were Christians. There were times it was referred to as those of the way. It was people that was what they referred to those who had accepted Christ as. He says, I persecuted them too. He said, hey, we're like each other. He was finding common ground. He was attempting to connect with his listeners. He was attempting to make a connection. Another thing I want us to notice, not only did he establish common ground with his listeners, he was trying to connect with them. And by the way, he made a connection, but he didn't do it by fabricating something. He did it through reality and what was true. Not only did he establish common ground, he didn't glorify his past life of sin. Look at verse 3. It says, actually, go down a little bit farther. I am verily a man which is a Jew, born in Tarshish, a city of Cilicia, yet brought up at the feet of Gamaliel and taught according to the perfect law. Was zealous toward God, as ye are this day. Down to verse 4. And I persecuted this way unto death, binding and delivering in prison both men and women. And he goes on and continues to talk about that. You know, sometimes we hear testimonies. We hear people giving their personal testimony, and in all reality, you aren't sure at one point whether they're giving glory to God or whether they're glorifying their past sin. When we were bringing the kids back from down to camp, we were listening to some Christian comedians on Spotify. But anyway, that's what we were listening to it on that, because the band had no CD player, couldn't listen to anything else. So we had gotten this thing and we were listening to this Christian comedian. The one guy actually made this comment, and I connected with this because it was me when I was a kid. He said when people would get up and give testimonies, he was always jealous because he didn't have an exciting testimony. because he got saved when he was a little kid. And I remember thinking the same thing when people would get up and give their testimonies in church. And the guy, they get up, I was this and I was that, and I did this terrible thing and I did that terrible thing. And I remember thinking as a young kid, wow, I wish I had a testimony like that. I wish I could say I'd been a drug dealer. I wish I could say this, that, or the other. I wish I had that person, that wonderful testimony to see, the change of God. Paul didn't glorify sin. He states it. He states his past. He talks about it. He states it, but he doesn't glorify it. He related characteristics, though, of his unsaved condition, which corresponded to those of his listeners. He did have a connection in that, they were upset about those who followed the way. Well, he was too. He was one who persecuted them too. But he also explained how Jesus dealt with him. First, I want to read verse 5. And also the high priest doth bear me witness. And all also I received letters unto the brethren, and went to Damascus to bring them which were bound unto Jerusalem for to be punished. And it came to pass, as I was on my journey, and was come nigh unto Damascus about noon, suddenly there shone about from heaven a great light round about me. And I fell to the ground and heard a voice say, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? Skip over to verse 19. It talks about that one more time. It says, verse 19, I said, Lord, they know that I am imprisoned and beat in every synagogue, them that believe on me. And when the blood of thy martyr Stephen was shed, I also was standing by, and consenting him to his death, and kept the raiment of them that slew him. And he said unto me, Depart, for I will send thee from far hence unto the Gentiles. Paul tells of his past, but he doesn't glorify his past. He glorifies, in fact, the change that took place in him. See, the fact of the matter is, he made connection with those he was talking to. He didn't glorify his past sin, but he talked about the change that took place in his life. He didn't promise a life of ease to those who believed. I've heard the gospel presented sometimes, and I've seen stuff on television. Probably the most extreme version of this, and I cannot remember his name. It slipped my mind. But I remember this guy, listening to this guy in college. We would turn into the radio just for a laugh. This guy was preaching the health and wealth gospel. That basically, if you got saved, you were going to be healthy, wealthy, and wise, pretty much. And I remember him making a comment one time on the radio as we laid in bed and laughed, because we would turn, it was always on late at night. He's talking about the fact that, if your money's making you sin, send it to me, because it won't make me sin. The fact of it is, sometimes you listen to things on the television, the Christian programming, and all these people talk about how when they got saved, everything in their life went right after that. That didn't happen to me. And I dare say that didn't happen to everybody else either. Paul doesn't tell his listeners that the moment he got saved, everything went good in his life. You think about, just think of this. Can you imagine Paul being interviewed on one of those television shows? Do we have today with us the great Apostle Paul? He's going to tell us about the wonderful things that happened to him the moment he got saved. So Paul, what happened to you while I was in prison? I was beaten. I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I spent in the deep. And there were times I feared for my life. They would say, it's time for us to go to a commercial break. We have to figure out what to do with this. Things didn't always go wonderful. Paul didn't present the gospel as a life of ease to everyone who believed. He doesn't tell them that the moment they're saved, everything's going to go good for them. But he does tell his listeners that when he was saved, it changed his life. He doesn't tell them, though, that everything's going to be wonderful, everything's going to be great. We do a disservice to the gospel when we present it that way. And sometimes it is presented that way. Oh, you got problems in your life. You just need to get saved and your problems will go away. That's not really true. Problems won't go away. They will have a way to deal with their problems that they have. There will be ability to have the power to change the situation in their life because it's Jesus Christ who can change their life. It doesn't immediately make everything go away. See, in fact, the first thing I want us to notice is he established common ground with his listeners. He didn't glorify the past life of sin. He didn't promise a life of ease to those who believe. Number 4, but he did say that it's the power of Christ that makes a difference. Go with me to verse 6 through 9. It says, "It came to pass that as I made my journey, and was come nigh to Damascus about noon, suddenly there shone from heaven a great light round about me. And I fell into the ground and heard a voice saying to me, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And I answered and said, Who art thou, Lord? And he said unto me, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom thou persecutest. And they that were with me saw indeed the light, and were afraid. But they heard not the voice that him that spake to heard not the voice of him that spake to me." See, it's the power of Christ that makes a difference. You know, not every story is as dramatic as the Apostle Paul. You know, the Apostle Paul has one of those glamour testimonies. He did. You know, he was persecuting the church, he was doing all this stuff, and he changed, and the Lord saved him, and he totally changed. But you know what? Even though maybe you might have been saved as a young person, and you can't get up and give one of those glitzy testimonies that says, I did this terrible thing and God changed me. But you know what? Every testimony is a before and after account of the transformation that takes place in the life of a person when they put their faith and trust in Christ. It's changed our lives just the same. Oh yeah, the change to those who look at it may not be much different. You know, it may not be as dramatic. But the God that changed is just as dramatic. Because all my sin is just as bad as anybody else's sin. And when God changed my life, and when God worked in my life and saved my soul, as God looked down on it, he viewed it the very same way. Paul included the events to show the genuineness of his change. He talked about things that showed that in fact these events took place in his life that showed in fact that he changed. And he went from there to there, and these things are verifiable. See, Paul's life displayed the change that was made in his life, and so should our lives display that change. Now, I'm not saying that our lives, as I said, are going to be as dramatic. But we are told that there's supposed to be a difference in our life because of the fact that we're saved. Are we showing the change through our life? Are we letting others see that, yes, Jesus saves through what I do and say? See, not only do we see that he established common ground with his listeners, he didn't glorify his past life in sin. He didn't promise a life of ease to those who believe. And there's the power of Christ that makes the difference. One more truth I want us to notice here quickly. Paul presents his conversion as a fact, not a feeling. Look with me in verse 11. When I could not see for the glory of the light, being led by the hand of them that were with me, I came into Damascus. And one Ananias, a devout man according to the law, having a good report of all the Jews that dealt there, came to me and stood and said to me, Brother Saul, receive thy sight. The same hour I looked upon thee. And he said, The Lord of our fathers, the God of our fathers, has chosen thee, that thou shouldest know his will and see the just one, and shouldest hear the voice of his mouth. For thou shalt be his witness unto all men of what thou hast seen and heard. See, Paul's story was based on verifiable facts. Things that others could attest to, not just how he felt. See, the fact of our conversion, you get saved, it's a fact. It's not a feeling. There'll be times that we don't feel saved. I don't feel saved just about any morning. When I get up before I have my coffee, I don't feel feel like I'm human, let alone a Christian. I feel our feelings don't determine the reality of the truth. Paul knew he was saved not because he felt saved, but because he had been changed. That God had changed his life. And he presented it that way. Go with me just for a moment to Luke chapter 8. The context of this verse, Luke 8:39, is when Jesus goes to heals the demoniac of Gadara. He goes to the country of the Gadarenes, and when he's there, he comes to a place where there's this demon-possessed guy who's roaming around through the graves. Jesus cast the demons out of this guy. And I believe truly this guy was saved right then and there. And Jesus makes a statement to this guy. He says, return to that, because the guy wanted to go with him. And the people from Gadara wanted Jesus to leave. They wanted him out now. Jesus says to this guy, return to thine own house, and show how great things God has done unto thee. In all reality, that's the challenge to testify. Tell others about Jesus Christ. He says, go back, tell where you came from, and tell them what happened to you. We're supposed to tell others about Jesus Christ. We're supposed to testify of what he's done for us. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15. 1 Peter 3:15, it says this, but sanctify the Lord God in your heart. Be ready always to give an answer to every man that asks you to of the reason of the hope that is within you, with meekness. The challenge of the Word of God is to be ready. To be ready to tell those who want to know, to be ready to tell those who we can tell what in the world happened to us. We sing the song, well, sometimes we sing the song, there's been a great change since I've been born again. And you know what? There should be. And there really, truly has been. Even if there isn't in our life this thing we can see, this great thing. I was saved at 15 years old. I was not that bad. My mom and dad wouldn't let me be that bad. They would have killed me when I was younger. They wouldn't know. I mean, it just was not the way it was going to be. It's like I remember one time when I was about 15 years old. I got up one day and told my dad I was quitting school. He said, no, you're not. I said, yeah, I want to quit school. He said, well, then I'm going to have to kill you. I said, what? He said, none of my kids are quitting school. He said, your mom had to quit school when she was in 10th grade. I had to quit school in 8th grade. You're not quitting school unless you're dead. So I went back to school. Fact of the matter is, I wasn't allowed to be that bad. So there wasn't this dramatic, great, big change. Oh, I was a bad kid. I did stuff. But you know what? It changed my life anyway. Desires changed. Things that I wanted to do, I didn't want to do them anymore. Things that I had desires to do beforehand, I didn't have a desire to do later on. God did change my life. It just wasn't as dramatic on the outside. It was more on the inside. We can share with those whom we know the change in our life. We can tell them what in the world happened to us. Because we're different. one more time, I'll read over just the statement of the truths. He established common ground with his listeners. He connected. He said some stuff that'll make them listen. He didn't glorify his sin. He didn't promise a life of ease to those who believed. But he told them it was the power of God that could change their life. And he presented his conversion as a fact, not a feeling. He wasn't saved because he felt saved. He was saved because he was saved. Listen, Father, I thank you for this day you've given. I thank you for the challenge of your word, Lord, this day. I pray that you be with us, Lord. Help us to honor you in all we do today. I pray you continue to bless us.